There's studies that say, like, more people think they've seen a ghost than met a trans person before. We, need to show the world that, for instance, trans people are, like, humans, and, like, trans women are real women, and, like, all the kind of basic things that people are still trying to wrap their heads around. We kind of just need more stories, of everything.
Americans in general, the movies for us have been a way of understanding our culture and a way of negotiating who belongs, who doesn't. And if you want to be real in the culture, you have to show up on that screen in some way. So cinema affects trans people to the extent that, are we considered part of America? Are we considered part of the conversation? Do people feel like they know us?
Over the last decade, there's been an explosion of transgender characters in Hollywood. But their stories are often embodied by straight, cisgender actors who are increasingly under fire for playing trans parts.
And your shout out at the Emmys saying you wanted to be the last cis actor to be...
I said I would not be unhappy were I to be the last cisgender actor.
At Outfest LA, one of the biggest LGBT film festivals in the world, a new wave of trans filmmakers is crashing the gates.
We really just need to start creating our own content. That's it. It's stop waiting for permission is really what it is.
A movement spearheaded by the Wachowskis, Laverne Cox, and the team behind Transparent.
Whenever you see the word revolution in Hollywood, what it has always meant is that a group of white dudes who are older get replaced by a group of white dudes who are younger. And they bring with them their particular aesthetic and their particular politics and their particular focus. And that's been the case every 10, 20 years since Hollywood started. I feel like we're on the precipice right now, for the first time ever, where the revolution is everyone except those white dudes. That is the revolution now.
I got interested in filmmaking because I had a burning desire to see the world that I lived in up on the screen.
It's up until
But even earlier, like, it could be like, boom.
Yeah, let's get out there.
Filmmaker Silas Howard has just finished shooting A Kid Like Jake, with Jim Parsons and Claire Danes as the parents of a unique young boy.
Because it's Claire Danes, so because she's on Homeland, they're like, all these crazy paparazzi guys, and then they were obsessed that I'm trans, and then they went into my Instagram, and they're like, newcomer, and anyway, we all survived the paparazzi. We had this little 5-year-old kid who's gender expansive and amazing little, like, princess boy. He's got great style.
Wow, that is great.
I know, he's really cute. It's hard for parents when their kid's different. It's fucking hard.
I first started dressing as a girl when I think I was like 4, but quickly learned that that was something that was bad and something I should be ashamed of and something that I shouldn't let anyone else know about. The first time I remember seeing someone who was dressing as a woman, either in movies or TV shows, was actually Billy Crystal on Soap. I remember watching that with my father and just being really intrigued by that character and just kind of curious, like, what was going on there. When I first came out as trans, I was living in Chicago, and I was taking public transportation every day. And people would make vomiting noises at me or spit on me or laugh at me. And not once in any of these instances where this happened did anyone else ever say, leave her alone, or don't do that, or that's not appropriate. It was kind of publicly accepted.
I grew up doing plays. I was in every choir, the swing choir, the jazz choir, chorale, singing in Italian. And then when I transitioned, I thought that I would have to give up on my dreams. I thought I would have to give up on acting, on music, on everything. You kind of immediately knew that you were resigned to a life of being a Jerry Springer cast-off, and that really that was your luck to be seen on Jerry Springer so that you were just seen.
Did you see a man when we were hooked up in the bathroom?
No.
No, but I do now.
Okay, so what's the problem?
I'm not gay. Do I look gay?
Are you mad because my is bigger than yours?
I was, I think, about 9 years old, and I was watching a talk show in the early 90s. And there was this really, like, unfortunate, sad individual on this talk show, and the audience really pitied him. And I felt this immediate, like, identification with that person. I was like, oh my God, that's what I am. And then I was also like, I don't want to be that. So that was the moment I actually decided to, like, repress my identity.
The world was so kind of dictated, when I was a kid. There were all these things I wanted to do as a person who was transgender and didn't quite understand why I was getting told, like, don't do this, do that. It never made any sense. The language of my reality was just kind of incomprehensible to me. So film was a way of learning that reality could be rearranged.
When I was a child, I'd steal like my mom's bra, or I'd steal some stockings. And I'd put them on, and it would just give me this like 4 minutes where I wasn't vibrating, and just the noise wasn't there anymore. Swim is actually autobiographical. Nikki tries on her mom's swimsuit, and it's not necessarily a matter of hyper-femininity. It's just merely a matter of feeling comfortable in one's own skin. And anyone that is in the closet, it's almost like a noise that goes on in the back of your head. And sometimes that noise can be so overwhelming that it just takes over your whole life. And in the moments since I've obviously transitioned, I haven't felt that noise anymore. And I think for Nikki, going into that pool got rid of that noise.
I was born and raised in Houston, Texas. Back then, I didn't even know what trans was. I didn't even know what drag queen was. I barely knew what gay was. I knew what some dicks was, but I didn't know what everything else was. But I always knew that I felt I wanted to play with the girls. I wanted to play with the dolls. I wanted the long hair, and I don't know, I wanted that figure. And then I saw Paris is Burning when I was 19 years old.
The 1991 Sundance hit, Paris is Burning, was a rare glimpse into New York City's drag and trans subculture.
I remember Octavia St. Laurent dominating the screen with beauty. I was like, this woman is beautiful. If this is what you can look like, then sign me up.
That's how people come to know people not like them, is cinema. Movies matter a lot.
But for decades, trans characters were either mocked or marginal in mainstream movies.
If you're talking studio films, there's very little to talk about because we're either not there or it's some horrific, stereotypical bad image. So we have a long way to go with studio films.
Hollywood treats us as like poor, sad trans people and either desexualized or fetishized.
From exploitation films to Oscar fare, many accuse Hollywood of amplifying pervasive fears and misconceptions.
The one that I always think about is Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs.
The 1990 Oscar-winning hit follows Jodie Foster's detective as she teams up with one sadistic serial killer, Hannibal Lecter, to hunt down another, Buffalo Bill.
He's a character who starts going out and killing women, removing their skins and making a woman's suit for himself to wear. So stitching together a feminine gender for himself to literally put over the old gender.
As his next victim awaits her gruesome fate, Buffalo Bill toys with his own reflection.
The mirror scene is a very common trope in trans representations. And so what we get is we're in the mirror. He's like looking right into the camera and we're looking right at him. We become voyeurs as he looks right at himself.
I remembered going to see Silence of the Lambs in New Orleans, and then the lights came on, and I was this very trans look. I was very gender nonconforming with the piercings, and I just remember people like looking at my piercings, looking at my weird gender expression, and then thinking of that movie, and I was like, no, I'm not a serial killer.
You are put in the category of something that is dangerous, something that is evil, something that is violent.
Your serial killers, your slashers tend to fall into this category of deceptive transsexual character who tricks everyone into believing she is a woman, but she's not really.
Let's just see who's lying, shall we?
At the end of Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, the main villain is revealed to be trans. Everyone sees the outline of the penis that she's tucking, and it causes all the men to just freak out. And seeing in the theater where everyone was laughing, it could just feel really demoralizing. Like, and you can't help but project yourself onto that.
The other category is the pathetic transsexual. These are your Mrs. Doubtfires, your Tootsies, your Some Like It Hots.
These older, white, married men who then transition to women. World According to Garp, or Normal with Tom Wilkinson. Like, oh, how sad to go your whole life and then realize like you're really a woman.
Okay, here we go. Another story about a late transitioning white trans woman who has privileges that don't even shine a light on the struggles that most of us trans women have.
For like trans men, you still almost never see that.
But Kimberly Pierce's 1999 indie hit, Boys Don't Cry, broke the Hollywood mold for trans portrayals.
Boys Don't Cry was the first film I saw that had like a trans masculine character who everyone treated as male.
Hilary Swank plays Brandon Tina in the true story of a young transgender man in small-town Nebraska who was brutally raped and murdered.
It was pretty personally affecting to me. I mean, I can't say in a good way because it's such a hard story, but I left the theater feeling some things about myself.
Back when Pierce made that film, there was a certain kind of credibility that she had as like a butch or gender non-conforming director.
It felt real, and it felt like it really centered a trans person. It cared about that person's happiness and goals and aspirations. It was an important movie.
The scene where Brandon and Lana have sex. Brandon's masculinity is totally not questioned by Lana, even though the camera does some revealing that maybe Brandon is not anatomically fully male. It was a way in which queer people negotiate these things between themselves, right? Like, I want to be read this way.
You're so handsome.
And the partner is like, yes, I see you this way. There's a kind of subcultural exchange of kind of faith in one another's genders that is so loving in the film.
And it was based on a true story, obviously, that was really serious and really tragic. The second half of that movie gets really difficult.
When Brandon's new friends discover he was born female, they turn on him, and their bullying soon escalates to violence.
I mean, I grew up in small towns, and there's such a weird relationship to the people that don't fit in, or the weird way that you're friends with them, people that could then do harm against you.
Later on in the film, Brandon's brutally raped, and afterward he goes and takes a shower, and the camera starts looking at his body in a much more feminine way. It was almost like the rape had destroyed his masculinity. And that shower scene always really turned me off because I felt like, okay, now this is becoming a story about a woman who's been raped. And maybe we don't have a way to filmically think about a trans man who's been raped. Like, what would that look like?
In 2016, almost 2 decades after the film's release, students at Reed College disrupted a talk by Boys Don't Cry director Kimberly Pierce during a trans film event.
Some student activists really disliked the framing around the film. Like, this is not a trans director. Why is this person brought here under the moniker of trans? And what does it mean that trans people are not getting the opportunity to represent ourselves on screen?
It's not to say that Hilary Swank didn't do a great job, but there were trans men who could have played that part.
I auditioned for Boys Don't Cry. Wow. Yeah. So I know Kimberly Pierce. I'm just not dogmatic about no cis actors can play trans characters. I'm not a real big rule follower, and so I'm not a big rule maker. I want trans actors to play non-trans roles, so I don't want to get really super delineated about that. And so I hope for more patience on both sides, because there are big enemies out there. They have laws and money, and they're definitely attacking so many of us.
The conversation about trans cinema to me seems very stalled because all we keep doing is talking about representation. Trans people come out, they transition, they deal with all these trials and tribulations. That's kind of where we are at in the larger conversation.
Trans people are far less interested in the process of transition than cis people are. Cis people are fascinated with it, and to me it's like being fascinated by puberty. Like, an occasional coming-of-age story is great, but if that's all you had, it'd be really boring.
I'm interested in what do the worlds trans people make look like? What kind of an aesthetic world a trans director might create? How would that world replicate the sensation of being trans? And the work of the Wachowskis is so important as this node where you get trans people making cinema from a trans perspective that changed how cinema works.
Before the Wachowskis came out as transgender, their name was synonymous with a revolutionary cyberpunk action film.
Matrix, it's my movie. I want to be in a movie like that so I can be kicking my leg up and doing flips and doing all that kind of stuff.
Keanu Reeves plays Neo, a hacker who discovers that reality is just a manufactured construct.
It might be a $90 million sci-fi extravaganza with some of the coolest action of all time, but it still has elements that connect with the trans community of living in a world that you don't feel comfortable in, living in a world that feels artificial.
You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life.
Morpheus says, I'm going to diagnose you. You are dysphoric. You know that reality isn't really real, even though everyone's pretending it is. Just like trans people have this sense that the gender everyone sees isn't right. And then he says, I'm going to give you a choice, but beyond this point, you can't go back.
You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
In trans communities, people for a long time have talked about the red pill as kind of like a signifier for medical transition, because we get that this is really about taking hormones and like transitioning and finding your real body, the body that's living inside of you that we turn on by flipping that switch.
The Matrix was like a huge, like iconic film for all of us. And then it made sense when they came out of, oh, yeah.
I had always been so kind of in tune and connected to their work. And then to find out that they were trans too, and like also from the Chicago suburbs like me, yeah, I feel a very intense sense of connection with them.
In cinema, you have all these scenes of the trans person gazing longingly into a mirror that shows the wrong reflection. Why do I keep getting this image I don't want? But Neo sees this shattered mirror where the boundaries are starting to become liquid. And he reaches over and sticks his fingers into it. And then the mirror penetrates him and transforms Neo into a different reality.
He's going into arrest.
The mirror actually goes inside his body. And if you imagine what a mirror would do inside of you, it would create an interior reflection of yourself. And he realizes, I have another whole body just waiting for me. And it's not about becoming one or the other real body, it's about having more than one simultaneously. That's how reality feels when you always have the memory of yourself in a different gender. All the characters have names that kind of reflect their hacker alias. And Switch was named Switch, and I was always like, well, why is her name Switch? And turns out Switch was written to switch genders inside and outside of the Matrix. But the executives at Warner Brothers decided it was too confusing in the Matrix, which was already really confusing to people.
Released in 1999, the same year as Boys Don't Cry, The Matrix became a worldwide sensation and one of the most influential action films of all time.
At the end of the film, the word system failure comes up on the screen.
I'm going to show them a world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries.
And the camera pushes right between the M and F in system failure. Male, female, let's clear those away and find a different world. Outside of binary gender, I jumped up off my couch when I saw that with new eyes, because Neo has to learn how to see again, and so do trans people.
That kind of understanding and pushing against binary expression, I mean, binary expression is just fucked up. It's just like bringing us down. I waited a long time to transition because I didn't feel male, I feel masculine. I'm just who I am. I don't really fit in a box, and that's good for me. I like that, even if it's uncomfortable. And I finally let myself transition because the queer world around me was really open about expression, and you could be trans, masculine, and wear a dress, and you could be, I just like all the things. Even if I don't do that, I want to be at that party.
Coming out of San Francisco's queer art scene in the late 90s, Silas Howard and Harry Dodge made the indie buddy film By Hook or By Crook.
There was some independent cinema that was happening, and there were films like Go Fish, and there were films like Spike Lee's movies, and there were just like people making their world on the screen.
The pioneering 2001 indie film By Hook or By Crook was one of the first features starring and created by gender non-conforming filmmakers.
Are you boy, girl? Both. He's a girl. Hey, you want to play ball?
That just sort of encapsulated how kids are about gender, which is like, duh, he's a girl, let's play ball.
You don't get explained what are their identities, what are their bodies like. You just have to be in the world and figure out its internal logic. It's almost like finding the rabbit hole in the Matrix and going down it into a queer underworld of San Francisco.
We didn't fit into a gay stream. We were a mix of genders. We were sort of punk, we were dramatic, we were a hot mess. Misfits, we were just super misfits.
Silas plays Shy, who comes to the big city and partners up with Harry Dodge's magnetic and tormented Valentine.
I now do a decent impersonation of an actual man. I remember at one point, one of the editors was like, you need to have Valentine die, like, that'll make people really sign on. And we were like, no, this is where the little freak doesn't die. Like, the little gender non-conform, like, they get to live, they get better.
Drunk and called me last night, looking for my name.
You know, I feel like blasting it.
Blast it for a minute.
To remote. I am Maya Taylor, the star of Tangerine.
Speakers up, bass pumping. You and your friends, you can get it too.
My childhood was abusive. It was, I was the kid that was scared to go home because I knew that I was going to get my ass beat for whatever reason. When I was 18, I moved out to Los Angeles with my aunt, and she introduced me to the lifestyle of prostitution, and it was scary every time. I told her I didn't want to do it anymore, and she threatened to send me back to Texas with the family that I was running away from. Then one day, I was standing outside of the LGBT Center on Santa Monica and McAdam. I saw Sean and Chris Bergosh walking around trying to talk to the other trans women, but they were working and they be spooked, when they see a white guy and they think it's a cop.
Maya introduced cis director Sean Baker to Kiki Rodriguez, who co-stars with Maya in Tangerine, a 2015 micro-budget comedy shot on an iPhone and based in large part on their own experiences.
Even putting aside that it was a narrative about like two trans women of color, which is obviously like so killer and groundbreaking and important, I just love that it's like such an indie film that just kind of like plucked some non-actors off the street.
When we got the first treatment, we were just going over all the lines together, thinking about what needed to be changed. Because some of the words, they seemed too proper. It didn't have that street slang and everything, like what would really be said.
Merry Christmas Eve, bitch.
In the opening scene, tight shots and warm lighting quickly establish Cindy and Alexandra's intimate bond.
You immediately know that you cannot separate them.
Were we supposed to share it? Yes, we're supposed to share it, bitch. I'm broke.
I love them. I love their creativity. I love their messiness.
Cindy has just gotten out of jail. Alexandra, drops the bomb saying, oh, well, have you heard? Your man has been sleeping around with everybody, girl.
Cindy goes on the hunt for Dinah, one of the women who's been sleeping with her boyfriend.
It was so like, okay. Bitch, I'm going to beat your ass.
What are you doing? Fucking Dinah. In there.
Where else in a movie do you see a trans woman of color put her hands on a white woman, dragging her out of where she is, and just like dragging her into every space in the neighborhood? It's an incredible inversion of the racial hierarchy that you normally see trans women of color placed in, which is as the victims of white people.
Tangerine's authentic, irreverent performances set against a gritty LA backdrop broke with the tone of traditional Hollywood trans narratives.
With something like a Dallas Buyers Club or a Danish Girl, like they're very stately, award-resonant sort of films, or whatever you want to call them. And I feel like Tangerine was just kind of like a big like fuck you to that sort of thing.
Like the car wash scene, that's happened in real life. Razmik wants a trans woman because he can get something that he can't get from his wife.
We're gonna make you stay in this car through the whole car wash as the oral sex is happening, because that's what happens. It's turning the tables on the viewer. You have to go on the ride.
Like the women say on the block, they say he was munching on bird.
I mean, the movie has such a like a great energy and vibe, but like it also like allows the audience to settle into these like quieter, very human moments.
Alexandra sings a Doris Day classic to an almost empty bar.
This is what she really cares about. This is her passion and her love, where she's just most like herself.
The Christmas song evokes a childhood fantasy, but her weary audience suggests some distance from those dreams.
Toyland, Toyland. It was awful. I hated it, hated it, hated it, hated it. I thought it was just old. I don't want to sing this shit.
In the film's climax, it's revealed that Alexandra also slept with her best friend Cindy's boyfriend, Chester.
Sean said there's gonna be a twist. And then to find out that, oh, I slept around with your man, it hit me really hard because I know the friendship that they had, but they come back together because they are all that they have.
The glory of that movie is the final scene. You know, they're sitting in the laundromat at the very end of the film after this crazy night.
Girl, here.
And Maya takes off her wig and gives it to Kiki. And it's just a beautiful, tender, real moment of solidarity, of kindness.
Sometimes in this world, trans women, all we have is each other. And when one girl's got a wig, then we both got a wig.
Tangerine is a really interesting test case because on one hand, they do things right that most other people don't. On the other hand, it's a movie that's still done by cis people for cis people. And my understanding is Kiki went right back to the streets after that film.
Sean has helped Kiki and me a great deal. The decisions that she's made them on her own. He's gotten her cell phones, he's gotten her apartments. Damn, he's done a lot. Like, my whole life, you know, as you look around this apartment, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Sean and Chris Bergosh finding me.
Tangerine was praised around the world, and Maya became the first trans actress to win major awards.
This one's the Spirit Award. 2016 Best Supporting Female, Maya Taylor, Tangerine. That's how it's supposed to be done. Next, I need my Oscar and a Grammy. And then I'd be happy.
When I decided to transition, I moved from New York to LA and went with a trans friend of mine on a road trip with my cat in the back seat, and had all these kind of weird, awkward experiences of being like newly trans and passing as a man for the first time in my life. And I decided to make a film kind of inspired by that.
Reese Ernst's short film, The Thing, played at Sundance in 2012, just as new trans projects were taking root in television.
I met Jill Soloway at Sundance, and then 2 years later, Jill reached out to talk about collaborating on this pilot, which was Transparent. So it was me and Zachary Drucker, who I work with on the show. We both went to go meet with Jill about it. And Zachary and I left the meeting and got a bottle of champagne because we knew it was a big deal.
The 8-time Emmy winner is based on the real-life transition of creator Jill Soloway's father, embodied in the show by Jeffrey Tambor's Maura Pfefferman, a retired professor with 3 grown kids.
No, come on.
I mean, it's such a powerful scene, and for any gender non-conforming transgender person, like, you have to walk into a bathroom X number of times a day, and it can just be so stressful.
Are you a man? This is the ladies' restroom.
Yeah, we're aware what it is, thank you.
You don't go up against this much aggression and not develop a finely tuned sense of humor.
He's a woman, and he has every right to be in this bathroom.
Well, no, he does not.
You really see how absurd things are.
There are young women in here that you are traumatizing.
Oh, really? Oh, you mean the little snickering bitches over there?
It's so the opposite of these sanitized stories I grew up on, where people always did the right thing and they were perfect and they knew the right thing to say. So a show like this is just like, here's messy people being all kind of fucked up, and it's like, it's so, you know, real.
In Transparent's first season, trans comedian Ian Harvey plays a love interest to one of Maura Pfefferman's children.
He was literally the first trans man to ever play a trans man on TV.
I was so excited to see him represented as sexy and attractive, and then that all got kind of taken away.
You want this?
Yeah, I do.
You're gonna get it. Pull down those panties.
They start to kind of have sex in the bathroom, and there's always the question of, you know, how are we gonna do it?
Oh,
I got it.
And it's just kind of this pathetic transsexual moment, right? Like, he can't complete the act. He needs help, and he can't even handle his tools properly.
Oh, shit.
So it really is this kind of terrible pulling the rug out from under a character that who could have really asserted like a very real trans masculinity. Like, trans men don't, like, that wouldn't have happened. It felt wrong.
Both Ian and I felt like You know what? Trans people can have really awkward, embarrassing experiences. Like, yeah, like that's real. We kind of like forgot that that was a first, and we're jumping ahead to the murky, complicated, messy stuff when sometimes culturally people still want that affirmational thing.
While mainstream critics praised Transparent for bringing trans issues to light, many trans viewers felt the show was repeating old Hollywood habits with its focus on an older white trans woman played by a cisgendered actor.
They are an example of how to evolve when you get feedback. When the community says, we got a problem, they completely listened and they did everything in their power to change course.
I interviewed for first season, it didn't work out, and then I came back and interviewed for the second season, and it did work out because they pushed.
The addition of Silas Howard and Our Lady J expanded a team that already included several trans creatives on both sides of the camera.
It was the mix of people that Jill got in the gate. Paramount lot is like classic Hollywood gate, and so when you go through that, you know, you do feel like you're getting through some classic fucking Hollywood gate, and for so many of us, that was like, had never happened.
Prior to this, I wasn't really out and proud about my transness with everybody, so I kind of navigated the industry, what we call stealth, and so this was like a coming out party for me.
Hi. Hey, what's up?
Jay Duplass's Josh Pfefferman pursues Trace Lizette's Shay, signaling a rejection of the trans romance taboo.
The fact that there is a scene with the trans woman who is having, you know, this chemistry with this straight dude who would have never considered it otherwise, like that alone is huge. But then you add the additional layer of having to disclose about HIV, and it just becomes even more rich and nuanced.
You just were about to fuck me and like probably not give me HIV.
It was written by Our Lady J, who's in that writer's room and is open about living with HIV as well.
It seemed fun. Like, this is fun.
Fun?
Yeah, you seem fun.
Fun? Like a sex worker, good time fun? I'm a person! I'm not your fucking adventure!
She was able to write that scene in a way that was really real and honest, and is a conversation that a lot of trans women have to have.
They just go into authentic, complicated things where there's not a right or wrong. It's about people, you know, trying to figure out what they need and if they can give it to each other.
Transparent's watershed release in 2014 helped transform the media landscape for trans representation.
Our voices in the trans movement was really starting to pick up. And me and my friend Jen Richards, my Her Story co-star, we were living together in Chicago, and Jen started writing her story. The characters, Paige and Violet, are very close to Jen and Angelica, but they're really also a composite of so many trans women that we know.
Nominated for a 2016 Emmy for Outstanding Web Series, Her Story was directed by up-and-coming Hollywood trans filmmaker Sydney Freeland and co-stars and was co-written by Jen Richards.
It's a story about a trans woman who had to endure all kinds of horrors before she eventually became a lawyer and now still struggles with dating, and another trans woman who lost her job and now lives with an abusive boyfriend. It's not a light story, and yet it's so kind of sweet.
One more bite.
One more bite.
James, she gets kissed by him unexpectedly. And there's this moment after the kiss where she just has this smirk and smile on her face. Girl, this guy just kissed me. But damn, she hasn't told him that she's trans yet. Will that piece of information break that connection that they have?
I love that project. I think it's so great, again, using genre, using like romantic comedy or sort of these ways to show love and looking for love. It's like a window in, you know, it feels compassionate.
I really like you.
This wasn't this tragedy of a woman being killed once a guy finds out she's trans. This was a different response.
Do you want to walk with me a bit?
Okay. Trans people watch something like Her Story and they get to identify with the main characters. They can see them treated with dignity and respect and that there's hope. Like just the fact that there's hope. Trans people don't get that very often, and it's why we're desperate for that kind of content.
Senior year, I attempted suicide. And I just was like having one of those moments, I think, that I feel like a lot of trans people have. And so I like tied the string around my neck. I started choking, and then I didn't tie it right, thank God. And I slid backwards and hit my head against the back of the shower, and I just started crying. And I knew in my heart, I was like, I'm trans. But at the time, there weren't any trans filmmakers. And that was the excuse that I gave myself. I mean, I ballooned out to like 250 pounds, and I was like drinking every night. I was getting blackout drunk. People would like literally like stop me on the street being like, are you okay? When Lana Wachowski came out, and I said, well, there's a trans filmmaker. To see that another filmmaker had taken that journey and come out the other side and was still directing, like, if I hadn't had that example, I might have still been in the closet. That's why representation is so important. That's why trans filmmakers behind the scenes and actors in front of the camera are so important, because they provide a conduit for people that are struggling with these issues to see that they can move forward and that they can be successful.
But even for the Wachowskis, coming out wasn't painless. In 2012, Lana's brother came out as Lily, coerced by the press.
Literally, a reporter showed up at her door and said, I know what's going on with you. I'm publishing a story tomorrow. So Lily, that night, put out her own statement about it.
As the Wachowskis transitioned, they've continued to make movies that question the boundaries and borders which divide us.
There's a strong storyline through all of their pieces about human connection, period. How people connect across all the different intersections of identity.
Their groundbreaking Netflix series Sense8 features multiple characters in disparate cities around the globe, whose shared sensations transcend race, sexuality, geography, and gender.
They are in and out of their bodies constantly, and they share memories. It's not so much about discovering your true identity, but discovering that no one really has one.
The show's trans hacker Nomi, one of 8 connected strangers, is played by Jamie Clayton.
To have a trans character played by a trans actor, written and directed by trans creators. I believe Sense8 to be the most trans text that we've seen so far in terms of mainstream media.
Nomi tries to console someone in her group by sharing a difficult memory.
Let's strip it!
As you watch the pre-Nomi, represented by a male actor, we get adult Nomi intercut with the younger version of herself. She hasn't left behind her history. She still feels that memory. She's like multiple people at once all the time.
To have gone a whole lifetime and never get to identify with the hero, to then have this like really sexy, cool superhero type with a hot girlfriend, like that's huge. Like that's incredible for trans people.
After a motorcycle accident at the Pride Parade, Nomi is hospitalized, where her mother tries to make her male again by any means necessary.
I think they're trying to lobotomize her or something.
You could be dead within 6 months. Jesus Christ.
To be trapped in this medical setting where you have no agency. This is every trans person's worst nightmare.
It plays on that anxiety and fear of not being seen.
We should go.
This is for your own good, Michael.
Don't call me that.
Her mother's refusal to use her name. Oh, I just like want to like scream. Like I want to throttle her.
Just go.
We take it for granted that parents will defend their children, that your parents are supposed to be the one people in this world who love you and support you no matter what. I don't know any trans person who can say that. Their own family rejects us. My mother once told me, I will never call you Jen because Jen murdered my son.
That's pretty heavy.
It's hard.
Being trans is a very, very difficult journey. It's like bringing your spirit through the eye of a needle, and most of us do not come through the other side unscathed.
I would identify as like a filmmaker, bad guitar player, dog enthusiast, whatever, and trans, you know, and all of these other things. Like, one doesn't negate the other, but it's not the first thing.
Silas Howard's recent documentary, More Than Tea, co-produced by Jen Richards, showcases the lives of several trans people.
All 7 of our subjects would have been just as interesting if they hadn't been trans. Like, they are just really incredible people. None of them can be reduced to that one aspect of their identity.
Giselle's a glam. It's like, she is just gorgeous. She is like, I don't know, she's like a rock star. She has it tattooed on her knuckles and she earns it like 100%.
I'm a badass, and there's not really a trans badass out there yet, so I'm claiming it. So wherever I can be a villain and wreck shop, I'm here for it.
Nice.
I'm here for it.
Are you nervous at all today about this premiere?
No, well, my dad's coming, and we hadn't been in each other's lives since I was 13, and just recently we reconnected, so this will be his first time seeing the film and sharing the day with him, where it's just kind of like a father-daughter day. It's gonna be very special. My father kicked me out at 13. I found myself in situations that would make any child grow up really quick. There was 2 separate rapes that happened in alleys. There was times that I was jumped outside of my school. Sometimes I didn't even see punches coming. Just being you was causing people to get so violent.
This has been a unique experience for me, and seeing this whole transgender community is kind of eye-opening to know that we in the straight world have our ideas and thoughts of what transgender people are or are not.
Right.
And actually, we don't have a clue of their fight, their battle, some of them wanting to commit suicide. I didn't even realize how big of a deal for them just to walk down the street and be accepted. And to see my child in this person that she's created, she's as beautiful as any movie star. The dads out there and the moms out there who have these preconceived ideas of what their child should be need to take a step back and love them where they are.
It's a beautiful message.
It's real, it's in my heart.
For the record, my mom and I are like best friends now. It took time. It took time. She had to mourn the loss of her son, which I get now. But yeah, now she introduces me to everyone as her daughter. She says she forgets I was ever not her daughter.
My mother told me to kill myself. My mother's like, please stop telling people that. I hate when you tell people that or whatever. But for me, it's beauty. It's a beautiful part of my story because it's a part of the transition. And people need to know, how did you get from telling me to kill myself to sharing my clothes and doing my hair? It takes time. And love really does heal all things.
We're in Jamestown, North Dakota. It's a big change from LA, where I knew so many different people, and I don't know, people were messy and drama-filled and all of that. And then here, I just live a happy, normal life. I went to go film Happy Birthday, Marcia, and by this time, I was talking to a guy online. He would actually call me and ask me how my day is going, and if I'm sad about something, he'd lift me up. He was very respectful. And don't you be over there laughing, bitch. And I said to myself, I should go meet this guy in North Dakota. And it was one of the scariest decisions I had made in my life. I was nervous that he probably wouldn't show up, or this is too good to be real. I got off at the Fargo airport, and as soon as I walked into the lobby, we hugged and we kissed in the middle of the lobby. It turned out to be the best decision that I've made in my life, moving here and being with him. Ain't he just cute?
Yes, I love this woman more than anything. She's a very great actress. Great woman. Wouldn't change it.
You know I don't like you.
No, you love me.
That's my baby.